One Piece. After transforming into Ganyu, he joined the Straw Hat Pirates. Chapter 1. Transmigrated, isn't that just unbelievable? Ganyu never imagined that a nap during an elective class would lead her to transmigrate into the anime world she was just binging yesterday. Even more unexpected was that she had transformed into the paper-thin wife in the hearts of countless otaku, Ganyu, whose name differed from hers by only one character. That's right, she not only transmigrated but also changed gender. From an ordinary college student, she became an adept of the nation of Liu on the continent of Teyvat. Calling her an adept isn't quite accurate, she is currently a Qilin immortal beast. Not only does she have a pair of small Qilin horns on her head, but she can also transform into her Qilin form at any time. However, the elemental power within her current body is less than 1% of its original strength. If she transforms into her Qilin form, it will be very difficult for her to return to human form afterward. So, unless it's absolutely necessary, she won't easily transform into her Qilin form. Fortunately, in the midst of it all, she realized a way to change this situation and restore her original strength. Participate in the main storyline of this world. One thing needs to be clarified. The world she transmigrated into is not the continent of Teyvat where her original body resided, but a passionate anime she had been following since childhood, One Piece. In other words, she needs to join the protagonist group of this world, the Straw Hat Pirates, to restore her body's strength. I still don't know what the current plot is. Has Luffy set sail yet? I seem to be on a small, uninhabited island right now. It shouldn't be an island the protagonist group would pass through. So I must find a way to leave this island and actively seek them out. On the deserted island's beach, Ganyu sat on a reef, letting the sea breeze ruffle her ice-blue hair, her calves, encased in black stockings, gently swaying. Occasionally, she caught a glimpse of her reflection on the sea surface, her delicate face shimmering in the light, her white short cheongsam with gold trim outlining her graceful curves. The hem of her dress lifted slightly with the sea breeze, creating a striking color contrast with her black stockings. The woman in the reflection possessed both the ethereal aura of an immortal and a touch of worldly charm. A word naturally popped into her mind. Pure and seductive. It was hard to imagine that one day this word would be used by her to describe herself. But there was no denying that this word was the most fitting for the current situation. Ganyu stared at her reflection with a complicated expression for a long time, finally letting out a soft sigh. Forget it, let's focus on serious matters. Currently, there are 3 ways to leave this island. The first method, fly directly to another island. Her current body is theoretically capable of aerial flight. Ganyu tried it, and indeed she could float dozens of meters in the air and fly freely, but after only a few minutes, she had exhausted her already limited elemental power. Clearly, she couldn't leave by flying now. The second method, congeal ice to cross the sea. Her elemental attribute is ice, which means she could also do what Admiral Aokiji does, freeze the sea surface into an ice layer to cross it. However, she faced the same problem again. Her elemental power was insufficient, she might run out of it halfway across the ocean. Of course, her true form is a Qilin, and Qilins are aquatic, so even if she fell into the sea, she wouldn't drown. But as everyone knows, the most dangerous place in this world is the sea, where countless sea kings lurk beneath, enough to threaten Ganyu, whose strength is now less than 1% of its original. It seems there's only one way now. Ganyu turned her gaze back from the horizon, her autumn water-like eyes reflecting a few trees. Just a short distance from the beach, in the center of the island, stood 7 or 8 tall trees, their trunks looking very suitable for shipbuilding wood. Ganyu certainly couldn't build a ship, but making a small raft with these trees would be quite easy. Without further ado, Ganyu extended a delicate hand, closed her eyes, and her lips seemed to be silently reciting something. Soon, ice-blue spiritual light appeared from all directions, gradually converging in her palm, and amidst the chilling aura, a bow materialized in her hand. There really is a bow. Ganyu's eyes lit up. She had only tried to summon it, but she didn't expect to actually succeed in summoning her original body's weapon. With this bow, shooting down a tree will be simple. She slowly drew the bowstring with 2 fingers, and ice-blue elemental power began to flow at her fingertips, transforming into a crystal-clear ice arrow on the bowstring. Whoosh! Accompanied by an extreme whooshing sound, the arrow struck the giant tree's trunk, and with a bang, the tree fell to the ground. The power is a bit more than expected. From a distance of over 10 meters, this arrow pierced a large hole through the tree trunk, then embedded itself in the ground, freezing a large area of land. Her arrow not only dealt damage but also had crowd control. If this arrow hit a person, it could certainly pierce through them with ease. Moreover, if she appropriately restrained her strength, she could even achieve control without harming anyone. Just as Ganyu was admiring her masterpiece, a voice, suppressing anger, came from the island. Who's the bored guy who did that? Ganyu's body stiffened. There's someone else on this island. She looked down in surprise, only to see two hands pushing aside leaves from within the tree trunk she had shot down, and a person actually crawled out. This was an adult male with moss-green hair, a stern face filled with anger, and covered in broken branches and leaves, looking quite disheveled. 3 swords were tucked into his waist, and he had already drawn one. Like a startled beast, he scanned his surroundings, searching for the enemy who had attacked him. Before long, his eyes met Ganyu's, who stood on the reef. Zoro. Upon seeing that striking green hair, a hint of surprise gradually appeared in Ganyu's eyes. No need to search now, the protagonist group was already on this island. No, besides me, there should only be him on the island, could it be that he hasn't yet? A woman. A slightly astonished voice interrupted Ganyu's thoughts. Zoro was staring intently at her, his expression even showing a hint of wariness. He had failed to catch his prey at sea and happened upon this island. Seeing that the weather was nice, he decided to take a nap in a tree. However, he didn't expect that after only a short nap, he felt a cold aura, and then he fell from the tree. Plunging headfirst into the mud was certainly not a pleasant experience. Extremely angry, he had originally intended to strike a blow against the guy who ambushed him. But he never expected that this guy was actually a woman. Why did you ambush me? After staring for a full 10 seconds, confirming that the other party seemed to have no desire to attack, Zoro sheathed his sword and demanded fiercely, his eyes menacing. As he spoke, he looked at the ground, only to see a patch of frost, gradually turning into water vapor under the direct sunlight. Are you a devil fruit user? A few minutes later. Shooting the tree with a bow and arrow. How could you even think of that? With your strength, a simple push would knock it down. What a stupid woman. Zoro sat sprawled on the tree trunk, which had a large hole in the ground, his eyes scrutinizing the strangely dressed woman 10 meters away. Ganyu smiled indifferently, her eyes also looking Zoro up and down, as if she was looking at some rare item. Indeed, it was rare, a character from an anime was now alive before her eyes. If she had her phone with her, she would definitely go up and take a photo. As for the stupid woman, from his mouth, she didn't feel angry at all. It had been less than an hour since she changed from he to she, and her gender perception hadn't yet adjusted. Since she wasn't a woman, stupid woman, naturally held no offense for her. The expected scene of a woman getting angry didn't happen, which surprised Zoro a little. This woman had a pretty good temper. You want to leave this island? He asked after a moment of silence. Yes, I want to find a group of people. I thought it would be difficult, but now it seems quite easy, Ganyu nodded. The people you're looking for are in the East Blue. Yes. On which island? I don't know, Ganyu shook her head. Do you know where they are? I don't know. Then you have no clues at all, how could you possibly find them? Zoro looked speechless, he felt it was a bit difficult to communicate with this woman. Although the East Blue is vast, there aren't many islands. Seeing Zoro about to get angry, Ganyu reined in her desire to tease him a bit and said, besides, isn't there only one route in the East Blue that leads to that path? The people you're looking for are going to the Grand Line. Zoro's expression was startled, not expecting a woman he met by chance to have the ambition to enter the Grand Line. But then he thought of the arrow that carried frost earlier, and the faint sense of threat emanating from her seemingly delicate body. This woman's strength seemed to be quite extraordinary. And she was suspected to be a devil fruit user, so it was reasonable for such a person to want to go to the Grand Line. So, what kind of people were the ones she was looking for? Zoro narrowed his eyes and asked, are the people you're looking for pirates? Not yet, I guess, Ganyu gently shook her head, stroking her chin. Not yet, which means. Zoro came to a conclusion. This was a group of pirates who hadn't yet set sail, and this woman before him was a designated member by the captain of that pirate ship. He had never imagined that Ganyu had not yet joined that pirate crew. Because in his opinion, with this woman's strength and beauty, no pirate crew in the world would refuse her to join. Pirate. That identity doesn't quite suit me, Zoro said indifferently. Not only does it not suit you, pirates and pirate hunters should be mortal enemies who fight on sight, Ganyu agreed. Zoro's pupils constricted slightly, and the surprise on his face flashed away. You know who I am. The famous pirate hunter, Roronoa Zoro, who in the East Blue wouldn't know you. Ganyu's lips curved into a faint smile. Zoro suddenly stood up and walked away with long strides without looking back. His figure cast a long shadow on the ground, and it wasn't until he had walked a few meters that his low voice drifted back with the wind. My ship is docked on the other side of the island. Are you inviting me? Ganyu heard his unspoken meaning and asked with a look of surprise. Stop babbling. Zoro's steps paused. He turned half his face, his sharp gaze sweeping over Ganyu from head to toe, then suddenly pulled out a wild, fierce smile. Let's be clear first, I'm not a good person. If you follow me, I might just cut you down if I find you displeasing at some point. On the beach on the other side of the island, a small boat, 5 or 6 meters long, was docked. Get on the boat, what are you still standing there for? Zoro had already leapt onto the bow, holding an oar in one hand, impatiently looking at Ganyu, who was still standing on the shore. You're going to sail with this boat? Ganyu asked with uncertainty in her voice as she stepped onto the small boat with her short high heels. The appearance of this boat was truly unsatisfactory. To call it a boat, it was more like a small raft. It was even worse than the small boat Luffy initially stole from Alvida in the original story. Not only was it more dilapidated, but it was also narrower. Fortunately, the inside of the boat was tidy enough that she, who had a slight obsession with cleanliness, didn't have nowhere to step. How big of a boat did you think it would be? Zoro casually tossed her an oar. He then retrieved the anchor, a rope tied to a reef, and pushed off the shore with his foot, and the small boat slowly left the shore. Since you know my name, you should know that I have no companions, and one person can't steer a large ship. With things said to this extent, Ganyu had no way to complain about the boat anymore. However, she always felt that sailing across the vast ocean in such a small sightseeing boat was truly outrageous. Would they really not encounter danger? Such a small boat would be overturned by any random wave, not to mention that the oceans of this world were extremely dangerous, with sea beasts tens or even hundreds of meters long potentially spawning in the seawater at any time. And there was one most important question. Ganyu pursed her lips, as if thinking of something, then looked at Zoro, who was diligently rowing in front of her, and asked hesitantly. By the way, how are we going to handle personal hygiene needs? Huh? What did you say? Zoro looked up blankly, not having heard clearly. I said, how are we going to go to the toilet? A hint of crimson floated across Ganyu's pretty face, finally, and rarely, bringing out the greatest advantage of this body. Unfortunately, before her was the most insensitive man. Do you even need to ask? Just do it directly into the sea. Zoro had an expression like he had never seen anything so strange, but as he spoke, he suddenly realized something was wrong, and his voice gradually trailed off. That's right, this guy is a woman. He used to either go out to sea alone or on other people's cargo ships or merchant ships. He had never had the experience of going out to sea alone with someone else. So he hadn't even considered this kind of problem. Now that he thought about it, he suddenly regretted letting this woman on board. Should he just throw her off now? Are you thinking of throwing me back on the island? Zoro's body stiffened abruptly, feeling a dangerous gaze fixed on him. This woman, how could she know what he was thinking? Are all women this perceptive? Being exposed before he even acted, the famous pirate hunter was momentarily thrown into an awkward situation. His mouth twitched, and he actually dared not meet that gaze, turning his head and saying, "What nonsense are you talking about, stupid woman? If I wanted to throw you off, I wouldn't have let you on the ship in the first place." Hey, let's hope so. The sunlight was faint, and the sky was clear and crisp. After a day and a night of sailing, the two arrived at the island on a tranquil morning. Shell's town. This was the first island Luffy landed on after setting sail in the anime, the domain of Marine Colonel, Axe Hand, Monka, and also the island where Zoro first appeared in the original story. If all went as expected, Zoro was about to suffer. I've brought you to this island, so why are you still stopping me? Can't find your way. At the port dock, a man with 3 swords at his waist was frowning, staring impatiently at a woman blocking his path. This commotion attracted the attention of many people at the dock. Both of them were too striking in appearance. One looked like trouble, exuding an aura of, "Don't mess with me," while the other was breathtakingly beautiful, making many seafaring men's eyes glaze over. It was hard to imagine 2 such different people disembarking from the same ship. Under the gaze of many eyes, the exquisitely beautiful woman spoke in an ethereal, pleasant voice. "I'm hungry." Huh. Zoro's eyes widened, as if he had heard something absurd. "If you're hungry, go find a restaurant and eat. I don't have money." "What does your lack of money have to do with me?" Ganyu blinked, tilting her head slightly. "Can't you treat me to a meal, for the sake of our journey together?" "Why should I treat you to a meal after bringing you to this island?" Zoro subconsciously wanted to refuse, but he couldn't stand her expectant gaze. He stopped mid-sentence and sighed. "Fine, let's go." Although he appeared annoyed, Zoro had to admit that during their 2 days together, he didn't actually dislike the woman. However, he had already made up his mind to ditch her after this meal. No matter what, traveling with a woman was simply too troublesome. As expected. Walking behind Zoro, out of his sight, Ganyu's eyes curved slightly, revealing a cunning smile. For her, who had read the original story, manipulating Zoro was incredibly easy. This pirate hunter appeared cold on the surface, but he was a typical softie who wouldn't yield to force, especially when facing women and children. He would almost never refuse most of their reasonable requests. However, he was definitely thinking of ditching her after this meal. Hey, it won't be that easy. 5 minutes later. Inside a restaurant named Fudfu. 1 plate of grilled meat, 1 fresh fish soup, 2 portions of egg fried rice, 1 bottle of rum. Your meals are all here, esteemed guests. A well-built young woman with a headscarf placed plate after plate of food on Ganyu and Zoro's table. Beside her was a little girl helping her carry dishes, who seemed to be her daughter. A key character from the original story. Ganyu thanked the woman, her gaze lingering on the little girl for a moment before moving on. In the original story, Zoro killed Monka's son's pet wolf to protect this little girl. To avoid implicating the girl's family, he made a wager with Monka's son. If he could endure a month without food or water while tied up, the matter would be settled. Can a person really go a month without food or water? She wasn't sure if Zoro could last a month. But she remembered that in the original story, before Luffy arrived at this island, Zoro had already lasted 9 days. 9 days without food or water was completely inhuman, and then after eating a rice ball, he immediately recovered his fighting strength and caused a ruckus at the marine base with Luffy. He's practically not human. Hey, what are you spacing out for? If you don't eat, I'll finish it all. Zoro swallowed his food in large bites, then looked up to see Ganyu hadn't touched her food at all, so he couldn't help but ask. This woman, ever since he met her, would occasionally space out, lost in thought. Ganyu snapped back, speared a piece of grilled meat with her fork, put it in her mouth, and after chewing, slowly said. I was thinking, can you survive a month without food or water? Zoro was momentarily stunned by her words, almost choking. After taking a sip of soup, he grumbled. I'm not a monster. I'd definitely be dead if I went a month without food or water. This guy, what kind of questions is he asking? After eating, the two parted ways at the restaurant entrance. Zoro was accustomed to traveling alone, and he believed that Ganyu was already part of some pirate crew, which was naturally at odds with his identity as a pirate hunter, so there was no need to continue traveling together. However, before parting, perhaps out of camaraderie from their journey, he uncharacteristically said a few extra words. Hey, just by looking at you, I can tell you're a noble young lady who hasn't been out for long. You need to understand, the sea is very dangerous. Don't just get killed by someone easily. But you can also rest assured, if something really happens to you, and I happen to be quite free, I'll avenge you on the way. After speaking, he turned around and walked away in the opposite direction from Ganyu, without looking back. However, just as he rounded the corner of half a street, he suddenly stopped, a vein throbbing on his forehead. Hey! He spun around abruptly, only to see the ice blue-haired woman maintaining a perfect distance, following him about 3 meters behind like a nimble cat. Seeing him turn around, she casually tilted her head, and the bell in her hair jingled with a crisp, ding-a-ling, sound. How long are you going to follow me? He asked through gritted teeth. Are you asking me? Ganyu feigned confusion, looking around as if she had just noticed Zoro's question. Suddenly, her pupils suddenly constricted. This was her body's instinct giving an early warning, wanting to act on its own, but she forcibly controlled her body. Because a long sword had already been drawn, Zoro took a sudden step forward, shielding Ganyu behind him with one hand, while with the other, he slashed the air like a crescent moon. Swish! Blood splattered, accompanied by a mournful wail, and a massive body suddenly recoiled, crashing to the ground, leaving a long trail of blood. This is. Ganyu followed the fallen behemoth with her gaze, only to see it was a wolf, with thick fur, sharp fangs and claws, and a dog-like build. A panicked expression suddenly flashed in her eyes. This isn't right. A wild wolf wouldn't appear out of nowhere on the street. It was most likely Helmeppo's wolf, but why would it attack her? Shouldn't it be the little girl in the restaurant? If so, wouldn't the plot be ruined? Would Zoro still agree to the wager with Helmeppo for her sake? Hey! You savage, where did you come from? How could you kill my precious pet? Passers-by kept their distance, as if they had seen something more terrifying than a wolf, but their eyes held more disgust. A guy who walked with an arrogant swagger, with a center-parted hairstyle, looking like the foolish son of a wealthy landlord, came striding over aggressively. His scrawny build naturally couldn't be described as aggressive, but he was followed by a large squad of Marines carrying guns. Only 2 people on this island could travel with so many Marines, Monka and Monka's son. This person was clearly Monka's son, Helmeppo. What are you guys still looking at? My dad is Monka. If you dare to get this close to watch the show again, I'll throw all of you into prison. He first threatened the nearby pedestrians, seemingly enjoying their frightened expressions. Then, he approached the corpse of his pet. Looking at his pet wolf, which was undeniably dead, he was so angry his mouth was twisting. You dare. He pointed at the man who, after chopping his pet, stood there calmly wiping his sword as if nothing had happened. How dare he be so arrogant? After killing his pet, not only did he not run, but he stood there provoking him. This guy, I must kill. Suddenly, Helmeppo noticed a charming, exquisitely beautiful figure hidden behind the man. The morning light gilded the figure, ice blue hair drifted dreamily in the wind, and a delicate, perfect face had no flaws, not to mention her unique and particularly alluring attire. When did such a beautiful woman appear on this island? Instantly, lust surged into his brain. Helmeppo, who had never left Shell's town since birth, had never seen such beauty. His breathing quickened, and his eyes revealed blatant greed. Arrest both this man and woman. Imprison the man, and I'll take the woman. I want to interrogate her personally. The Marines behind him hesitated slightly at his words. Even a fool knew what Helmeppo wanted to do. What? You won't listen to me? Aren't you afraid I'll tell my dad, Monka? Helmeppo saw their hesitation, put his hands on his hips, and threatened arrogantly. The Marines trembled upon hearing the name, seemingly terrified of it. The struggle in their eyes gradually turned into submission, and they stepped forward with grim faces. Give up, both of you. If you surrender, we won't shoot. With a series of metallic clinks, 7 or 8 flintlock pistols were simultaneously cocked. The dark muzzles gleamed coldly in the sunlight, completely surrounding the two. Seeing this scene, the pedestrians showed expressions of fear and pity. These 2 young outsiders were truly unfortunate. To provoke Helmeppo on this island meant their fate would be no better than a pirate falling into the hands of the Marines. However, to everyone's surprise, facing the encirclement of so many gun muzzles, neither of the individuals showed the slightest trace of tension or fear. It was as if the guns in the Marines' hands were mere toys to them. Is there some rule on this island that prohibits harming animals? After the atmosphere solidified for a few seconds, Zoro finally finished wiping his sword. He glanced at the surrounding Marines, his brows tightly furrowed as he asked. During this time, he subtly moved his body completely in front of Ganyu. He knew that Ganyu's strength meant she didn't need his protection, but for some reason, the woman had started spacing out again, and for much longer than usual. Was she scared by that wolf? There is no such rule, but you harmed young Master Helmeppo's pet. His father is Captain Monka, the highest-ranking officer of the local marine base, so. A marine replied with a grim face, unable to finish his sentence. As Marines, they felt ashamed to abet evil, but Captain Monka was too fierce and brutal. They couldn't bear the consequences of defying his son. Hey, so he's just a foolish son who relies on his dad. Zoro scoffed dismissively. He understood now, he had provoked a local scion. That's right, my dad is Monka. Despite the mocking tone, Helmeppo looked as if he was honored. He raised his head and exhaled through his nose, saying, "You audacious fellow dared to kill my pet. Originally, you were going to die with it, but." At this point, he couldn't help but glance behind Zoro again, his eyes openly filled with admiration. "If you can give your woman to me, I might just have them imprison you for a few days before letting you go. Using a woman as a threat, you really are shameless." Zoro expressionlessly placed his hand on the hilt of his sword at his waist. He drew out all three blades, and the flashing, cold light instantly scared Helmeppo back several steps. "Hurry up. Can't you see he's drawn his swords?" Seeing that the Marines beside him hadn't moved, he angrily kicked them a few times. "You all remember, my dad is Mon." Before he could utter the word, Ka, a ghostly figure flashed past at extreme speed, accompanied by a lightning-fast sword light that pierced through the entire street in the blink of an eye. Three-sword style. Onigiri. Everyone present felt a chill run through their hearts and quickly dissipate. When they recovered, they saw the scion who had been so imperious a second ago, now lying on the ground, covered in blood. Crack. This was the sound of guns shattering. The unreactive Marines, their faces filled with horror, stared in disbelief at the guns in their hands that had exploded out of nowhere. No, the guns weren't the key. Their young Master Helmeppo seemed to have. Young Master Helmeppo. The Marines cried out in panic, as if the sky had fallen. Hadn't the sky fallen? Helmeppo, whom they were supposed to protect, had been cut down by someone right before their eyes. If Monka found out, wouldn't he take their lives? Wait, three swords, green hair, this seems to be the rumored pirate hunter. Roronoa Zoro. A few sharp-eyed Marines recognized Zoro, and the horror on their faces became even more pronounced. The rumors said this pirate hunter was a ruthless character who killed without batting an eye. Pirates in the East Blue feared him like a tiger, and even the Marines held a degree of awe for him. However, in the past, Marines and pirate hunters were considered half-colleagues and had no conflicts. But now, their idiotic young master, whom they were supposed to protect, actually tried to steal someone else's woman. Wasn't that an act of seeking death? It seems he really is dead now. But the problem was they couldn't explain it to Monka. Thinking of Monka's terrifying appearance when angry, a few Marines' legs trembled, and they actually suppressed their fear of the pirate hunter. Roronoa, you killed young Master Helmeppo. Captain Monka will not let you go. Yes, that's right. You'd best surrender. A very comical scene unfolded. Each Marine told Zoro to surrender, but none dared to approach him. If you don't dare to attack me, then scram. Call that guy named Monka, and tell him I'll be waiting for him right here. Zoro saw what these Marines were thinking. He had no interest in bothering these weaklings. He waved his sword-holding hand in the air, scolding them impatiently. Upon hearing this, those Marines, instead of feeling angry at being slighted, collectively let out a sigh of relief. They certainly didn't want to fight the famous pirate hunter for a Helmeppo. Zoro's words were equivalent to giving them a way out. Hurry, young man. It'll be over once Monka arrives. That guy isn't human at all. After the Marines retreated, the surrounding residents finally dared to approach, anxiously trying to persuade the two outsiders. Zoro, however, paid them no mind, his gaze fixed on Helmeppo, who lay in a pool of blood. The wound across his chest was shocking, but a faint rise and fall proved he was still alive. Consider yourself lucky. He hadn't held back, but the majority of the power from that earlier, Onigiri, attack had been concentrated on the Marine's gun, with only the remainder striking Helmeppo. Helmeppo's survival was indeed luck, The wound looked terrifying, but it hadn't hit any vital points. But even if he had miraculously survived, Zoro had no intention of finishing him off. Such a minor character wasn't worth a second strike. He was more concerned about the abnormality of the person behind him. This woman seemed to be having an episode. It's over, everything's messed up, the world line has been altered. Ganyu's pretty face was filled with confusion, her pink and purple eyes unfocused, her lips muttering words Zoro couldn't understand at all. Even though he couldn't understand, Zoro could still feel her inner panic. He found it quite interesting. This was the first time he had felt such genuine emotion from this woman. You're panicking like this just from cutting a marine's son. How are you going to be a pirate in the future? A smirk appeared on Zoro's lips as he teased her. That's not the problem. If you cut him down, then you won't be able to meet. Sigh. Ganyu didn't know how to explain the original plot to him, hesitating and looking dejected. It was strange, in the original story, Zoro wasn't this brutal. He had barely said 2 sentences before cutting Helmeppo down with a single strike. Although he wasn't dead yet, given Monka's personality, upon learning his son had been cut half to death, it would certainly become a fight to the death. Regardless of how the situation developed next, Zoro would no longer tie himself up with ropes and wait for Luffy's arrival as he did in the original story. What was worse was, Zoro nonchalantly sheathed his sword and sat down grandly on a chair brought by the residents. These residents seemed to treat him as a hero, which showed how terrible Monka's and Helmeppo's reputations were. They also brought a chair for Ganyu, but the worried Ganyu politely declined. Zoro looked at her and couldn't help but frown, saying, I completely don't understand what you're worried about. It's just some marines. Once I cut down that guy named Monka, can't we just run away? What, young man, are you really going to deal with Monka? He's the highest ranking officer of this marine base. If you can cut him down, that would truly be wonderful. The residents seemed to have suffered under Monka for a long time, and upon hearing Zoro wanted to fight Monka, they all became excited. That's exactly what I'm worried about. Ganyu suddenly felt a headache. If you cut someone down and run away, who will Luffy and Kobe find as a crewmate when they land on the island 9 days later? And what will happen if the Straw Hat Pirate's first mate is gone? And from the looks of it, he even wanted to take her with him when he ran away. What was all this? She had originally hoped to meet Luffy by following Zoro and naturally join the nascent Straw Hat Pirates. But now, what should she do if the pirate crew's first mate was going to run away with her? How about helping the Marines capture him? This was the only solution Ganyu could think of in a short time. Monka couldn't possibly be Zoro's opponent. In the original story, Zoro, who had been starved for 9 days, couldn't be defeated by him, let alone Zoro in his prime after just eating. Only she, the one who caused the butterfly effect, could push the original plotline back on track. A flurry of dense footsteps suddenly sounded, and a massive figure appeared in everyone's sight. It's Monka. The residents' expressions changed at the sound, and they retreated like a tide. Amidst heavy footsteps, a 2-meter-tall burly man walked, dragging a giant axe, its blade sparking against the stone pavement. Behind him, the snowy white marine uniforms filled the entire street like a wave. It was you two who touched my useless son. Monka's bell-like eyes scanned the crowd, finally locking onto the 2 people at the street corner, a green-haired man and a blue-haired woman. They didn't look like ordinary people. But this was his territory, Monka's territory, and anyone who dared to offend him, no matter where they came from, would die. The culprit was found, so his son's body. His eyes narrowed, and he suddenly reached out, grabbing a marine by the collar beside him and lifting him up. Isn't he still alive? You fools dared to deceive me. The marine was terrified, stammering, Captain, we were too rushed at the time, we didn't see clearly if the young master was dead or not. Monka roared in anger upon hearing this, his hand gripping the collar suddenly exerted force, throwing the marine forward. Zoro's eyes turned cold as he watched the marine flying towards him. He reached out and caught him steadily. Just as he was about to put the marine down, the outline of a giant axe suddenly appeared in Zoro's vision. The axe blade fell from the sky, seemingly intending to cleave both him and the marine in half. It turned out that Monka had seized the opportunity while Zoro was catching the marine, leaping up with his axe to attack. You really are quite shameless. At this, Zoro was truly enraged. This Marine captain's son acted wantonly in the streets, and he himself was even worse, not even caring about the lives of his comrades. These points almost stepped on Zoro's landmines. 3 swords. In a flash of lightning, Zoro pushed away the Marine he had saved, then drew the swords from his waist, instantly adopting the 3-sword style stance. He was confident that even if it was a passive counterattack, he could still strike Monka with his sword first. However, someone was even faster than him. An ice crystal arrow streaked across the sky, its tail emitting glints of cold light under the sunlight. Clang! There was a crisp crashing sound, and then something unbelievable happened. Monka, who had launched a seemingly powerful attack, was utterly defenseless against that single arrow. With just one collision, his axe shattered with a boom. Ni. Monka looked bewildered, seeing that after the arrow pierced through his iron axe, its speed didn't diminish at all, and it shot straight into his chest. Why doesn't it hurt? His body felt no obvious pain, as if it hadn't been pierced like the iron axe, but what followed was a bone-chilling cold that made his flesh lose all sensation. Frozen, my body. Monka's pupils widened in shock, watching his body, starting from the chest where he was struck, being covered in ice at a visible speed. A few seconds later, when he fell from the air, covered in frost, he had already turned into an ice sculpture. Under the sunlight, the ice sculpture refracted a rainbow of colors, reflecting the horrified and bewildered expressions of everyone present. Roronoa Zoro stiffly turned his head, looking at the woman who held a longbow and still had it drawn. From the moment they met, Roronoa Zoro knew that this seemingly delicate woman, whose appearance could trigger a man's protective instincts, possessed unusual strength. But he never expected a woman to be so powerful. Even if he had been in Monka's place just now, he would have had no confidence in blocking that arrow. Roronoa Zoro, I've figured it out. As Roronoa Zoro was lost in thought, Ganyu slowly lowered her bow, her eyes fixed on Roronoa Zoro's, and said with a relieved tone. Since the plot has already changed, let's just let it go completely off track. It wasn't until she shot that arrow that Ganyu truly understood one thing. Her current identity was not just a passerby in an anime, but a participant capable of changing the story's direction herself. Did Roronoa Zoro and Monkey D. Luffy's meeting absolutely have to be in Shell's town? Did Roronoa Zoro absolutely have to endure 9 days of imprisonment? No, absolutely not. They could completely cut down Helmeppo, defeat Monka, and then actively search for Monkey D. Luffy on the open sea. Again, the sea is vast, but there is only one route to the Grand Line. 9 days later. A refreshed Shell's town welcomed 2 new guests. A straw hat boy, always curiously looking around, and a short boy with glasses and pink hair. Kobe, is this the marine base you were talking about? The straw hat boy adjusted his straw hat, which was almost blown away by the sea breeze, and looked with fresh curiosity at the port scene full of patrolling marines. Sugoi, as expected of a marine base, it's full of marines. That shouldn't be right. Even a marine branch base doesn't need so many marines patrolling, does it? The short, pink-haired boy called Kobe looked confused. He had been to other marine-controlled islands before, and none of them were as heavily guarded as this one. Don't you know? The marine captain here was defeated by 2 people a while ago. A local resident overheard their conversation and kindly explained to the 2. What? 2 people defeated a marine captain at a marine base? Kobe's mouth dropped open, his face full of disbelief. The reason for his shock wasn't actually that the marine captain was defeated, but that someone dared to attack a marine captain at a marine base. Those 2 people were simply too bold, weren't they? Kobe, why are you so surprised? Is a marine captain very strong? The straw hat boy scratched the back of his head, his youthful face filled with clear ignorance. However, his black eyes had already unconsciously lit up. His name was Monkey D. Luffy, a gum fruit rubber fruit user, a rookie pirate who had only been at sea for a few days and didn't even have a bounty yet. His ultimate goal was to find One Piece and become the Pirate King, the pinnacle of all pirates. His short-term goal was to acquire a pirate ship and find a group of like-minded companions. Luffy, a marine captain, is certainly strong. In the East Blue, they can be considered the strongest in an area. What's more, these 2 people defeated him at a marine base. Kobe's voice carried a hint of excitement, Beneath his weak exterior, there seemed to be a heart that admired strength. Are they stronger than Alvida? Luffy asked again, his tone showing some anticipation. Clearly, he was interested. These two seemingly strong individuals would be perfect as his crewmates. And getting two crewmates at once would save a lot of trouble, which suited his intentions perfectly. Ah. Kobe pondered for a moment, seemingly comparing in his mind. A few seconds later, he nodded and said, they should be a bit stronger than Alvida, but I'm not very sure. The strength of Marine captains also varies. Uncle, was the former Marine captain strong? Kobe asked the kind resident from earlier. Upon hearing this, the man's face actually showed a hint of fear. Monka was very strong. Before those two defeated him, he was publicly recognized as a monster, and no one dared to anger him. Monka. I seem to have heard that name on Alvida's ship. Kobe mused upon hearing this. And Luffy couldn't help but press further, Uncle, who are those two people? What are their names, and where are they now? Do you still need to ask me that? Unexpectedly, upon hearing Luffy's question, the kind resident gave him a strange look. Why not? Before he could finish, Luffy's voice was cut off by himself, because he saw a newspaper fluttering in the wind. On the front of the newspaper were two Crimson Pirate wanted posters. Pirate Hunter, Roronoa Zoro, a three-sword-style swordsman who uses three swords, a former bounty hunter, caused immense damage to the Marines during the Shells Town incident. Bounty. 10 million berries. Frost Arrow, Ganyu, unknown identity, unknown origin, uses a bow that doesn't require arrows, her arrows can cause freezing effects, and she was the pirate hunter's helper in the Shells Town incident. Bounty. 10 million berries. Pirate Hunter, Frost Arrow. Luffy grabbed the fluttering newspaper, looking at the two faces on it. His excitement grew, and it seemed as if someone was telling him in his heart. These two people would definitely be his crewmates. Thank you, Uncle, for letting me know about these two. A few minutes later, after reading the newspaper with Kobe and appreciating the great deeds Ganyu and Roronoa Zoro had done in Shells Town, Luffy said with gratitude. It was just a small thing. The kind resident waved his hand, then carefully scrutinized Luffy and Kobe, asking in confusion. Why are you looking for those two? Although they helped us get rid of Monka, they are now pirates, and approaching them is very dangerous. Uncle, you don't know yet, but he's also a pirate. Kobe said proudly, completely forgetting his miserable experience of being enslaved on a pirate ship for 2 years. That's right, my name is Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm the man who will become the Pirate King. Luffy thumped his chest, declaring generously. Those two are the crewmates I've set my sights on. Oh, I see. The kind resident suddenly understood. Then, under the gaze of Luffy and Kobe, he suddenly ran wildly, shouting loudly to the Marines patrolling the port as he ran. There are two pirates here, hurry. 15 minutes later, at the entrance of the Marine base. Who? Kobe was drenched in sweat, as if exhausted, panting heavily in a disheveled state. That uncle actually ratted us out, making us get chased for more than 10 streets and almost caught by the Marines. Ha, he really is a very interesting uncle. Luffy was also slightly out of breath, but he was truly broad-minded. He wasn't at all angry about being chased just now, and even had time to care about Kobe. But Kobe, weren't you going to join the Marines? Why did you run away when you saw the Marines coming? Of course I had to run. I was with you, they would definitely think I'm a pirate too. Kobe explained. Is that so? That's really a shame, it seemed like a good opportunity. Luffy shook his head. At this moment, the gate of the Marine base in front of them suddenly opened. Out came a burly, white-haired old man, who made Luffy instantly lose his composure upon seeing him. Let this old man see, who wants to join the Marines. Grandpa. Luffy's eyes widened, almost popping out from shock. If there was one person he feared most in his life, it was his grandpa, Garp, who had subjected him to devilish training since childhood. He never expected to encounter him on the very first island he landed on after setting sail. No, if he didn't run, he would definitely be captured by him. Luffy, in a flash of inspiration, grabbed Kobe, who was still bewildered by his call of Grandpa, and threw him towards Garp's face. Goodbye, Kobe, you can join the Marines with my grandpa. After a quick farewell to Kobe, Luffy used the fastest speed he had ever achieved in his life. His two Gomu rubber arms rapidly stretched out to grab a distant building, and then his body suddenly propelled forward. He completed this series of actions in just a few seconds. However, HMPH, you brat, you ran into this old man and still think you can escape. Come back to Marine headquarters with me obediently. Garp's lips curled into a smile. He hadn't expected his grandson, whom he hadn't seen in years, to deliver himself right to his doorstep. Luffy's burst of speed, in his eyes, was almost no different from standing still. Soru. With just a light step of his foot, he casually carried Kobe and instantly appeared at Luffy's landing spot after he propelled himself. A large hand, covered in armament haki, firmly grabbed the back of Luffy's neck. He, you two brats, are you ready to receive this old man's loving iron fist? That night, Luffy and Kobe, having received a good beating, were in a sealed room within the base. Ow, it hurts so much. Luffy, why is your grandpa so rough? Kobe, covered in bruises, lay on the bed, checking his injuries by the moonlight shining into the room. Good heavens, he was black and blue, and more than half of his body was swollen. He hadn't sustained such severe injuries in the 2 years he spent on Alvida's ship. That's just how Grandpa is. Every time we meet, I get a beating, but it seems like I get a little stronger after each one. Luffy wasn't much better off, his face bruised and swollen, looking quite comical. Nani? Can you really get stronger? Kobe became excited upon hearing this, he yearned to become stronger. Who knows? Luffy smiled, then slowly got up, rubbing his fists. He looked up at the ceiling where the moonlight shone through, and a flash of determination crossed his eyes. Kobe, you stay here and train with that old geezer. Even though it hurts, you'll definitely get stronger. Then, what about you? Kobe realized something and sat up from the bed, looking at Luffy with reluctance. Haha, of course I'm taking off first. With that, he punched through the ceiling above him, revealing a starry night sky outside, and the vast, boundless world. How can a pirate stay with you Marines? I'm going to find my crew. After speaking, he smiled at Kobe, made a goodbye gesture, and then pulled hard with both hands, launching himself into the sky like a spring. Meanwhile, on the rooftop of another building, an old man with gray hair witnessed Luffy's entire prison break. You brat, this old man will catch you again someday. One day later, a single-masted sailboat, about 5 or 6 meters long, sailed quietly on the sea. Inside the cabin, Ganyu curled her legs and leaned against the wooden wall, her fingertips gently turning the pages of a yellowed, East Blue Navigation Beginner's Guide. Her eyes occasionally darted to a compass on her wrist. This was an essential tool for sailing on the sea, commonly known as a compass. For sailing in the 4 seas, this ordinary compass is enough, but once you reach the Grand Line, you'll need a log post that can record the magnetic fields of islands. That kind of compass is even more complex to use. I can barely use the most basic compass right now. Sigh. After 10 days of recent study and practice, Ganyu deeply understood that navigation knowledge was not easy to master. On the first day after setting sail from Shell's town, they rescued a merchant ship that had been attacked by pirates. To thank them, the merchant ship's captain gave them a large amount of treasure. Rejecting Zoro's suggestion to hoard a lot of alcohol, Ganyu bought the current small sailboat on an island. However, it was only when they got the ship that they realized neither of them knew how to sail a sailboat. Helpless, Ganyu could only find a navigation book in the market, studying it while practicing on the open sea. In these 10 days, as a novice beginner, Ganyu had several times steered the ship into dangerous whirlpools, crashed into rocky shorelines, sailed into the mouths of sea kings, and even, due to improper operation, caused several capsizing accidents. Once, Zoro happened to be napping and almost drowned in the sea. In short, it was a miracle they were still alive. Luffy and Nami, where are you all? Looking at the obscure and difficult to understand knowledge in the book, Ganyu sighed silently. Sigh, she was having such a hard time. She had never sailed a ship in her previous life, and now her only companion was a top-tier directionally challenged person. Even now, Ganyu still believed that most of those unforgettable experiences over the past 10 days were caused by Zoro, the helmsman who couldn't tell north from south. But little did she know, her own navigation skills were equally poor. Hey, Great Navigator, come out for a second. At this moment, Zoro's voice came from outside the cabin. Great Navigator was a nickname Zoro gave Ganyu after several of her capsizing incidents. What is it? Ganyu replied impatiently. Although annoyed, she still closed the book without delay. For this directionally challenged person to actively call for her, it was probably an emergency. After emerging from the cabin, Ganyu immediately saw Zoro standing by the ship's rail. His gaze was fixed on the sea, his eyes shining like a hungry wolf eyeing its prey. Following his gaze, on the flat surface of the sea, there was a conspicuous yellow dot, vaguely discernible as a wooden barrel. I'm very familiar with the mark on that barrel, it definitely contains rum. Zoro licked the corner of his mouth, looking at the woman who had emerged from the cabin and was gleaming in the sunlight. He had to admit, the woman was truly pleasing to the eye. So, Ganyu's face was cold. Zoro slapped her shoulder casually. You can fly, can't you? The task of retrieving that barrel is yours. He called her just for this. Ganyu bit her lip, her pair of pink and purple eyes glaring, fiercely, at him. This guy really treated her like a laborer. He kept calling her, stupid woman, and, great navigator, yet he ordered people around with such self-righteousness. Even worse, this guy was a hopelessly severe, top-tier directionally challenged person, rendering her painstakingly practiced navigation skills useless. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. Ganyu clenched and unclenched her fist. Ice blue elemental power gathered in her palm, the surrounding temperature plummeted, and even the sea surface began to form tiny ice crystals. The air seemed to have dropped several degrees. Hey! Crazy woman, what are you doing? Zoro instinctively took half a step back, watching the increasingly strong aura emanating from her. Of course. Ganyu suddenly smiled brightly, her eyes curving into crescent moons, looking incredibly adorable, yet in reality, it filled Zoro with dread. I'm sending you to find your rum. An icy palm strike heavily landed on Zoro's back. The next second, a certain three-sword-style swordsman transformed into a shooting star in the sky, his scream piercing through the long sky. Phew, that feels good. Ganyu watched the parabolic trajectory, finally unable to hold back her laughter. All the pent-up resentment of so many days now vanished with that shrinking black dot. After more than 10 seconds of forced flight, Zoro landed precisely on the barrel, floating on the sea surface by the barrel's buoyancy, with not a single part of his body getting wet. This suddenly crazy woman, she throws quite accurately. He didn't think much about why Ganyu suddenly got angry. In his opinion, women having intermittent outbursts was a very normal thing. Even his childhood best friend, Kuina, whom he regarded as a rival to surpass, would occasionally show some of a woman's minor flaws, something Zoro had long been accustomed to. And the current Ganyu was also very different from when they first met. She would get mad at the slightest provocation, her emotions fluctuating more and more, which increasingly conformed to Zoro's understanding of a normal woman. Zoro felt very regretful and disappointed about Ganyu's change, always feeling that the companion who had satisfied him in all aspects at the beginning was gone forever. However, he had never considered one thing: he himself was the root cause of her anger. What a joke, the great pirate hunter would naturally not consider his own problems, he had already focused his attention on the barrel beneath him. Please, let it be rum. Since his request to stock up on alcohol was rejected last time, he hadn't had a drink in almost a week. Never mind, I'll push it back to the ship first. Zoro wiped his mouth, just about to jump off the barrel, when he suddenly heard a crisp crack. The top of the barrel unexpectedly split open, and before he could react, a fist suddenly shot out from the crack, heading straight for his face. There was actually a person in the barrel. Nani? Zoro was caught off guard, and the speed of this punch was unusually fast. Before his body could react, it had already hit his face. Before he could finish his sentence, he flew back to the small boat in a familiar arc. On the small boat, Ganyu, who was leisurely swinging her legs and reading, suddenly looked up, staring at the rapidly enlarging black dot in the sky, and blinked. How did he come back so quickly? She subconsciously reached out to catch him, but was suddenly drawn by the commotion coming from the direction of the barrel. This is. Ganyu's eyes gradually widened, a look of pleasant surprise appearing, a surprise so great that she completely ignored Zoro, who had heavily slammed onto the deck and was groaning in pain. You fool, how dare you hide in a barrel and ambush me? Zoro rubbed his aching body, looking angrily towards the barrel's location. He saw a figure emerge from the barrel with a splash. The sunlight outlined his shadow behind him, and the brim of his iconic straw hat was still dripping with seawater. Yo ho! The Straw Hat Boy's energetic voice came with the sea breeze. Where is this? What? It's just a kid. Zoro was stunned for several seconds until he confirmed that the guy hiding in the barrel was just a peer who didn't look very old. Hey, kid, what are you doing hiding in a barrel? I'm not a kid. The Straw Hat Boy puffed out his chest, revealing an exaggerated grin. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, the man who will become the Pirate King. After speaking, he suddenly covered his stomach, and his whole body wilted. Ah, so hungry, do you have anything to eat? This extremely jumpy speech left Zoro momentarily unresponsive, and it was several seconds later that he pointed at the boy who called himself Luffy and said, What are you talking about? Why should we treat an unrelated guy like you to eat? Zoro's voice abruptly stopped. He stared wide-eyed at the barbecue grill that had appeared beside him at some point, where Ganyu was skillfully flipping skewers. Hey! When did the barbecue grill get set up? When did you become so generous? This barbecue grill was a complimentary item from the ship's owner when they bought the ship. Zoro had to admit, this woman's navigation skills were incredibly bad, but her barbecue skills were indeed excellent. Ganyu didn't even look up. She was currently only thinking about making a delicious meal for her future captain. This is the man who will become the Pirate King, isn't he worth us treating him to a barbecue? What kind of reason was that? Zoro was speechless upon hearing this, vaguely feeling that this Straw Hat Boy seemed very unusual. Forget it, I'm a bit hungry anyway, grill some for me too. The meat is over there, didn't you see it? Ganyu gave him a disdainful glance, grill it yourself. But when her gaze turned to Luffy, who was staring eagerly at the barbecue, her voice immediately softened. Luffy, come and eat. Zoro watched this blatant double standard, his forehead veins throbbing. Dozens of minutes later. Ah, I'm so full, Luffy said with a happy expression, patting his distended belly. A week's worth of rations were all eaten by you, it would be strange if you weren't full. Zoro leaned against the side of the ship, his eyes filled with shock. This Straw Hat Boy was indeed unusual, he was the second most gluttonous person Zoro had ever seen in his life. And coincidentally, the most gluttonous person was also on this ship. He subtly glanced at the blue-haired girl who was elegantly reading a book. Who would have thought that such a delicate body could even hold an entire Sea King? Sometimes he even suspected she wasn't human, that a monstrous creature was hidden beneath her exquisite human skin. By the way, are you two pirates? Luffy suddenly sat up and asked. Yes. Zoro nodded, his eyes fixed on Luffy's stomach. His digestive ability once again shocked Zoro. One moment his stomach was as big as a ball, and the next it had returned to its original state. Who exactly is this guy? That's great, how about you two become my companions? Luffy was delighted to hear this, rubbing his hands together, looking at them both with anticipation. Huh, companions. Zoro poked his ear, glanced at Luffy, his voice carrying a hint of disdain. You mean for us to be your subordinates? This Straw Hat Boy might have some extraordinary qualities, but did anyone truly exist on this vast sea who was qualified to be his and Ganyu's captain? Not subordinates, but companions. Luffy spread his arms, pointing at Zoro with one hand and Ganyu with the other, shouting excitedly, however, I'm going to be the captain of this ship. Is this your ship that you want to be captain? Believe it or not, I'll kick you off the ship right now and let you continue to wander the sea. Zoro frowned. Completely different from the original story, Luffy had not saved Zoro, and the two had no previous interaction. In fact, it was Zoro who had saved Luffy's life at sea this time. Moreover, Zoro had not witnessed Luffy's strength, so in his mind, this Straw Hat Boy was constantly spouting nonsense. Hey, I say, why don't we get rid of this idiot? Zoro gave Ganyu a meaningful look. Ganyu quickly shook her head, indicating firmly, no. Zoro narrowed his eyes slightly, there must be something wrong here. Half a day passed, and it was afternoon. Roronoa Zoro had already taken off his shirt, wielding his blades under the warm sun, his entire body soaked in sweat. This was his daily routine. Sleep, drink, eat, train. Now there was no alcohol on the ship, and his sleeping cabin was occupied by a certain woman, so he had no choice but to train on the deck. However, now with an extra person, the already small ship felt even more cramped. What Roronoa Zoro wanted most right now was to kick this kid, who deluded himself into being their captain, off this ship. But that woman, unexpectedly, liked this kid very much. Not only did she let him ride the ship, but she also gave him roasted meat. Roronoa Zoro truly couldn't understand why. By the way, how can I get you two to agree to be my nakama? Luffy lay on the deck, looking at the sun above his head. Roronoa Zoro glanced at him, saying coldly, I already told you it's impossible. Why should we be your subordinates? What was so special about this kid who was obsessed with being a captain? But Ganyu has already agreed. Now it's just you, and our pirate crew can be formed. Luffy suddenly said with a grin. Nani? Roronoa Zoro was stunned upon hearing this, his gaze incredulously turning towards Ganyu inside the cabin. Is he telling the truth? Ganyu was lying on her side inside the cabin, her back to Roronoa Zoro and Luffy, leaving them only a graceful silhouette. Her bordered cheongsam and pure black one-piece stockings outlined her beautiful figure. Upon hearing Roronoa Zoro's voice, she still didn't turn around, as if she were asleep, not moving at all. But Roronoa Zoro knew very well that this woman was once again immersed in that book, East Blue Sailing for Beginners, which she could never quite grasp. She was reading. Seeing this, Roronoa Zoro shook his head helplessly. He knew that once she entered this state, no amount of calling would wake her up. Exactly like him when he was sleeping. Luffy darted over, curiously glancing into the cabin. Seeing Ganyu reading, he turned his head away, bored. His eyes darted around as he looked at Roronoa Zoro. Hey, what's your name? Why are you a pirate? Why do you have 3 swords on you? Luffy believed that the reason Roronoa Zoro didn't want to be his nakama was because they weren't familiar enough. So, as long as they talked and got to know each other, the other party would definitely agree to join him and Ganyu. Ah, that's right, in Luffy's eyes at this moment, Roronoa Zoro was already a third person, separate from him and Ganyu. Roronoa Zoro originally intended to ignore him, but Luffy just happened to be the type who wouldn't give up if you ignored him, annoying Roronoa Zoro to no end. Roronoa Zoro, 3-sword-style swordsman. Roronoa Zoro suppressed the urge to cut Luffy down with a single stroke, saying impatiently. Kid, you said you're a pirate, right? I used to be a pirate hunter, specializing in hunting pirates, so you'd best keep your distance from me. Pirate hunter. Luffy was stunned by the words. He suddenly remembered the 2 wanted posters he saw in Shell's town a few days ago. 2 pirates who defeated the highest-ranking marine officer at the local marine base. One's nickname was Frost Arrow, and the other seemed to be Pirate Hunter. Could it be? Luffy suddenly looked up, carefully scrutinizing Roronoa Zoro's face, then occasionally turning to look at Ganyu lying on her side in the cabin, his gaze sweeping over her ice-blue hair. These 2 people, weren't they, Frost Arrow, and Pirate Hunter? The 2 nakama he was looking for were Roronoa Zoro and Ganyu. Ha ha ha, this is great. Luffy couldn't help but burst into joyous laughter. Why are you suddenly laughing? Are you having a fit? Roronoa Zoro was startled by his sudden laughter. Roronoa Zoro, you must join my and Ganyu's pirate crew, this is all destiny. Nani? Why are you bringing destiny into this again? And what do you mean, join you guys? That woman and I are already a team, alright. What's the difference? We're all a team anyway. Completely different. The next day. So hungry. Unlike the energetic Luffy of yesterday, today he was weakly slumped on the deck. He hadn't eaten anything for an entire morning. For Luffy, it was no less than enduring torture. Idiot, if you hadn't eaten all the food yesterday, you wouldn't be starving now. Roronoa Zoro gritted his teeth from the side. He uncharacteristically wasn't training today. The reason, of course, was that the food had run out, and to conserve energy, he had to stop exercising. The food on their ship was actually enough for him and Ganyu to eat for a week. Although Ganyu had a large appetite, she wouldn't eat as much as this kid, and basically only indulged in a big meal after landing on an island. Roronoa Zoro suspected that even a month's supply could be eaten by this kid in a single day. But I'm really hungry, Roronoa Zoro, do you have any more food? No more, if you want to eat, Go fish it out of the sea yourself. I'm a devil fruit user. I can't go into the sea. If you can't go into the sea, then look up at the sky. Maybe a pie will fall from the sky. Roronoa Zoro's original intention was just to mock the kid, but he didn't expect the other party to take it seriously, no longer crying about hunger, but looking up at the sky with eager eyes. He was actually waiting for a pie to fall from the sky. Idiot. Roronoa Zoro was completely speechless. There was no saving him. This guy must be a rare idiot. Meat. Suddenly, Luffy's eyes lit up, saliva dripping from the corners of his mouth, as if he really saw a pie in the sky. Roronoa Zoro looked up in surprise. Oh, it was a pink bird. Wait, why is this guy reaching out his hand? Could it be? Under Roronoa Zoro's wide-eyed gaze, Luffy stretched his arm towards the sky, his Gomu rubber arm continuously extending, reaching for the bird's beak. Wait, that bird isn't right. Roronoa Zoro quickly spoke, trying to stop Luffy's action. He noticed that the bird's size was astonishingly large, looking much bigger than their ship, at least 10 meters. How dared this guy try to catch such a large bird? The large pink bird also noticed someone below attacking it, and a human-like look of mockery appeared in its eyes. It allowed Luffy's hand to grab its beak, and then, as he used the contraction of his arm to slingshot himself upwards, its beak suddenly snapped shut, biting Luffy's head. Listening to Luffy's screams, it couldn't help but become smug. This ignorant human kid actually dared to covet its flesh. Watch me carry you away. However, after only a few seconds of happiness, the large pink bird suddenly widened its eyes and looked sharply at its own body, only to see an ice crystal arrow shot into one of its wings. An icy, bone-chilling sensation swept over it. Ice began to spread from the area where its wing and the ice crystal arrow made contact, gradually covering its entire body, including Luffy, whom it was carrying. It turned into an ice sculpture. And fell straight downwards. Below, a cheongsam-clad girl with ice-blue hair lowered the longbow in her hand. She watched the trajectory of the falling ice sculpture, her eyes filled with satisfaction. As expected of her, she shot so accurately. Now, there was meat to eat. Half an hour later, the brilliant sunlight spread across the sea, plating a layer of golden glow on a sailboat. So full. Luffy lay on the deck in a big shape, his belly protruding, a look of satisfaction on his face. He squinted his eyes, looking up at the slowly moving blue sky and white clouds, letting the warm sea breeze caress his cheeks and stir his quietly rippling thoughts. His thoughts drifted back a few days. After setting sail from Windmill Village, where he had grown up since childhood, he encountered a whirlpool he had never seen before. He had no choice but to hide in a wooden barrel and drift on the sea to survive, spending several days. The first person he saw the moment he burst out of the barrel was Kobe. Unfortunately, after knowing Kobe for less than a day, he ran into the person he least wanted to see, his grandfather, Garp. Fortunately, he finally managed to escape from his grandfather's grasp, sailing the small boat he had snatched from Alvida overnight, hurriedly departing Shell's town. Then, he encountered another whirlpool. He once again climbed into a wooden barrel. This time, however, his luck seemed much better. In less than a day, he was discovered, and by two people he had decided to recruit as crewmates. Hey, after you're full, all you do is lie there. You don't even bother to pick up the bird feathers on the ground. That woman said to collect them to sell. A hurried and muffled voice came from beside him. The speaker was Zoro, who was engrossed in his daily workout, repeatedly lifting heavy barbells with his arms, sweat trickling down his muscular physique. What bird feathers? In a moment, Luffy's belly had visibly deflated. He sat up with a flip, his face full of curiosity. Of course, the pink bird feathers on the ground. She said these feathers might be very valuable. Zoro replied without looking up, continuing his workout. These feathers naturally came from the pink monster that had almost carried Luffy away earlier. After Ganyu shot it down with an arrow, it became a lavish roasted meat feast for the three of them. Most of it went into Luffy's stomach, and now only scattered feathers remained on the deck. Oh. Luffy lowered his head, picked up a soft pink feather from the deck, and examined it closely. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. If we sell these, can we buy a big ship? How could that be? They're just bird feathers. Even if they're rare, they're worth at most a few tens of thousands of berries. How much is a few tens of thousands of berries? Anyway, it's not enough for one of your meals. Zoro switched hands, lifting the barbell, a look of anticipation flashing in his eyes. However, it could buy a few good bottles of sake. Inside the ship's cabin, the blue-haired girl lay quietly on the bed, one hand gently propping her chin, the other holding a book, reading silently. She appeared to be fully absorbed in the pages. But in reality, her ears were secretly catching every word of the conversation coming from the deck, and her lips curled into a subtle, almost imperceptible smile. The relationship between these two seems to be getting better and better. Compared to their initial antagonism, Zoro's attitude towards Luffy had visibly improved a lot. However, compared to the original story, it was still quite a bit off at this point. Their true mutual recognition still needed a catalyst. Help! Save us! Suddenly, several shrill and panicked cries for help broke the tranquility of the sea. This is. After hearing these cries for help, a corresponding plot from the original story immediately appeared in her mind. Ganyu's lips unconsciously curved into a slight smile. She closed the book in her hand, rose calmly, and with a long-awaited shallow smile, slowly walked out of the cabin. Finally, it connected with the original plot. Hey, Zoro, did you hear someone shouting for help? It sounds like it. Hey, over there are 3 guys in the water. Luffy searched for the sound for a while, quickly pinpointed the location of the callers, and immediately said, "Let's pull them up." Wait. Zoro, however, reached out and stopped him. He narrowed his eyes, carefully scrutinizing the 3 figures struggling in the water. A moment later, he snorted coldly and said, "Look closely, these 3 guys, they're pirates." It is well known that the greatest danger on this sea is pirates. Even though he himself was now a pirate, it did not prevent him from holding a long-standing prejudice against pirates. These guys, 9 out of 10, were despicable villains and scum. Isn't that even more interesting? However, after hearing this, Luffy's eyes instead showed excitement. He immediately stretched out a Gomu rubber arm and pulled the 3 up. The moment Ganyu walked out of the cabin, she happened to see this scene, coming face to face with the 3 rescued pirates. As expected, she saw 3 pairs of greedy, lustful, and malicious eyes. Regarding this, Ganyu said she was already used to it. Almost every one of these romantically repressed pirates had this expression after seeing her. Yo, Ganyu, you're out. Luffy, seeing his only currently recognized crewmate, flashed an astonishingly wide smile. Look, I saved 3 interesting guys. Interesting. But they look like pirates, Luffy. Ganyu walked to Luffy and Zoro's side, maintaining a 2-meter distance from the 3 pirates. Not just, like, they are pirates. The smell on these guys can't fool me. Zoro corrected, giving the 3 a cold glance. He had noticed the dishonest gazes of those 3 guys. After spitting out several mouthfuls of seawater, the 3 drowning pirates finally recovered. Then, they almost simultaneously drew their blades and said in a threatening tone. That's right, we are subordinates of Clown Buggy. If you're smart, stop the ship. Your ship is ours, and that woman behind you belongs to us too. The 3 men's gazes swept past Luffy and Zoro, greedily staring at Ganyu. This was a top-notch woman. If they offered her to Lord Buggy, they would surely be heavily rewarded. I told you, saving them would have this consequence. Zoro shook his head, picked up a blade placed at the corner of the ship, and slowly approached the 3 pirates. You want to steal my crewmate? Have you guys asked for my opinion? Luffy clenched his fists, walking towards the 3 with a furious expression. Ganyu was his only crewmate right now. These guys actually wanted to steal her. Immediately after, screams echoed throughout the entire sea area. Ha 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 ha, so it's the legendary pirate hunter Mr. and Frost Arrow Ems. We're sorry, we were too arrogant just now. This is truly a big misunderstanding. If we had known it was you, we wouldn't have dared to be so presumptuous just now, ha 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 ha. Please don't hit us anymore. Please spare us. We won't dare to do it again. So, you guys stole treasure from a merchant ship, and then a red-haired woman tricked you out of both the treasure and the ship. On the deck, 3 pirates, bruised and battered, lay sprawled on the ground. Standing before them was a stern-faced man, casually carrying a long sword on his shoulder. It must be said that Zoro's face alone carried a certain intimidation in the East Blue. As soon as the three recognized his identity as the pirate hunter, their legs went weak, and they practically cried out, spilling all the details. Why, yes. It was that woman. She tricked us onto her ship, and then we were hit by a rainstorm and struck by lightning. All the treasure on the ship was taken by her. She looked so cute, but I never expected her heart to be so malicious. The three pirates said through gritted teeth. They had been plundering merchant ships on the high seas for a long time, but they never expected to fall into a woman's hands one day. And if it weren't for that woman, they wouldn't have encountered these three formidable figures like this, falling into their hands. Even Lord Buggy probably couldn't save them. She can predict the weather. A hint of surprise flashed in Zoro's eyes, then he turned his head, glancing intentionally or unintentionally at the blue-haired girl standing quietly not far away, saying pointedly. Sounds like she's a lot more capable than a certain great navigator. Meanwhile, Luffy's eyes suddenly lit up, as if he had fallen into some serious thought. That expression was exactly the same as when he heard about Zoro and Ganyu's identities yesterday. Seeing this, Ganyu couldn't suppress the joy in her heart. She even ignored Zoro, who was deliberately provoking her, and nudged Luffy's shoulder, asking. Luffy, what are you thinking? She wasn't tall, just over 1.6 meters, and even with a few centimeters of short heels, she was still about half a head shorter than the 1.7 meter plus Luffy. Luffy looked down at her slightly, excitedly saying, Ganyu, how about we find this person to be our navigator? Just as expected. You mean, the red-haired lady these three guys said tricked them out of their treasure? Ganyu asked back, feigning surprise, but with a hint of barely concealed joy in her eyes. Great, the plot is really back on track. At this moment, she was even a little moved. The storyline, which had deviated slightly due to her intervention, was finally pulled back onto the right path. However, the smile on her face had not yet fully blossomed when it suddenly froze. Because in the next second, she heard Luffy's loud, unwavering voice say. No, I want that guy named Buggy to be my companion. Huh, who did you say you want as a companion? Ganyu, who had never considered this possibility, was stunned on the spot. Anyone could see the shock and helplessness on her face at this moment. Buggy, Luffy scratched his forehead, his tone matter of fact, this guy sounds really strong, I want to recruit him. No, Ganyu was momentarily speechless, wanting to say something but unable to. How could it be Buggy? Who is Buggy? Zoro asked, a little confused. He vaguely felt the name sounded familiar. I don't know either, but didn't they say Buggy is their captain? Luffy pointed at the three pirates sitting on the ground. You guys don't know, Clown Buggy. The three pirates almost said in unison, their faces full of disbelief. In the East Blue, the name, Clown Buggy, was by no means inferior to Pirate Hunter. These people didn't even recognize him and showed no fear on their faces. The Pirate Hunter and Frost Arrow were one thing, but this Straw Hat, who appeared out of nowhere, even dared to disrespect their boss Buggy. And he even tried to make their boss his subordinate. How could that be possible? He is the captain of our pirate crew. He is a powerful devil fruit user. As soon as they mentioned their boss, the three immediately perked up, their tone full of boasting, and also subtly containing the intention of using Buggy's name to intimidate the other party. But obviously, the name, Clown Buggy, didn't scare Luffy or Zoro at all. Oh, a devil fruit user, that's not particularly rare. Zoro glanced at Ganyu and Luffy beside him. Unfortunately, their small boat already had two devil fruit users on it. Luffy pondered seriously for a moment, then suddenly clapped his hands. I've decided, let's go find that guy named Clown Buggy. The three pirates, upon hearing this, were the first to raise their hands in approval, all offering to lead the way themselves, claiming they could reach the island where the Buggy pirates were stationed within a few hours. They weren't genuinely leading the way, but rather planning to inform Buggy once they reached shore. By then, they might even earn a great merit and receive a reward from Buggy. Wait. Zoro then stood in front of Luffy. His gaze was sharp, fixed on Luffy, his tone showing no politeness. Kid, I never agreed that you would decide the course of this ship. His previous peaceful coexistence with Luffy didn't mean he had already recognized Luffy as captain. Although he never showed it normally, he was always a proud person to the core. In his 3 years at sea, Besides the two bounty hunters he met by chance, only Ganyu had the qualification to accompany him for such a long time. And Luffy, although it was clear he had something special about him, had not yet shown enough to earn Zoro's approval. Luffy clearly paused for a moment. Then he raised his head without backing down, looking directly into Zoro's eyes. I am the captain, and the course of this ship should rightfully be decided by me. No, this ship is not yours, and you are not the captain, at least, I haven't acknowledged it yet. As they spoke, the tension between them escalated. Zoro drew a blade glinting with cold light, and Luffy slowly clenched his fists, which hung naturally in front of him. Whoosh! The sea wind howled, making the sails flap loudly. The entire small boat seemed to be enveloped in an invisible pressure, making everyone present hold their breath. The three pirates trembled under this pressure, not daring to utter a single word. Only one question remained in their minds: who exactly was this Straw Hat? He wasn't afraid of the pirate hunter at all, and even dared to contend with him for control of the ship's course. Was he not afraid of being cut down with a single stroke? However, what they needed to worry about most was that if these two monsters really started fighting on this narrow little boat, they, the three unlucky ones, might get caught in the crossfire and be casually thrown into the sea. Stop! Just as the three pirates reached the peak of their fear, a clear voice suddenly rang out. The sound fell into the ears of the three pirates like heavenly music, making them almost collapse. They felt the suffocating pressure around them suddenly lighten. But the next moment, a bone-chilling coldness invaded their hearts, as if they were in a world of ice and snow. The three shivered in unison. They looked up, staring in astonishment at the source of the coldness. There she was. A slender figure had, at some point, intervened between the two monsters, in a standoff, her ice-blue hair fluttering in the wind, briefly cutting off the sharp gazes of Luffy and Zoro that were almost sparking. You two, are you trying to tear my ship apart? The blue-haired girl stood between the two, her expression calm, but her voice laced with anger. Anyone could tell she was very upset. Although she was the shortest of the three, her aura at this moment was the strongest. She naturally had reason to be angry. Half of this ship belonged to her, and every item on board was hand-picked and purchased by her. Now, these two actually wanted to fight on her ship. How could she just stand by and watch? It's just dealing with a brat. A few slashes and it'll be over. It won't damage your ship. Facing the oppressive aura of a Kirin beast, even Zoro couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat, but he still spoke in a forceful tone. So scary. As for Luffy, he was stunned by the sudden burst of Ganyu's aura. It was also his first time witnessing just the tip of the iceberg of Ganyu's strength. Is Ganyu really that strong? Luffy was incredibly shocked. He even had the illusion that Ganyu was more terrifying than his grandpa. Who knows how long you'll fight? What if you really break the ship? Won't we all be doomed? Ganyu unceremoniously poked Zoro's chest with her hand. With every word she spoke, she poked him once, and with every poke, Zoro took a step back. In no time, Zoro was backed into a corner. At this moment, then, she raised her hand and clenched her fist in front of him, looking up and glaring at him, saying in a threatening tone. In short, you are not allowed to fight on the ship, otherwise, I will personally freeze all of you. You. A vein throbbed on Zoro's forehead. He struggled against those pink-purple eyes for a long time without success, finally letting out a long sigh and sheathing his sword with a whoosh. Too fierce, it's better not to provoke her. Seeing Zoro compromise, Ganyu pursed her lips and smiled with satisfaction. With the one who had some sense suppressed, the other senseless one would be easy to deal with. Luffy, I have a way for you two to determine a winner. She walked over to Luffy, who was still dazed in place, and said with a beaming smile. From what I know, Clown Buggy is a very strong pirate. Since you want to invite him to join your crew, why not see who between you and Zoro can defeat him first? Whoever does, is the winner. Rather than letting them kill each other, it would be better to have them direct their efforts towards a common goal. Both of them going to find the same enemy could not only determine a winner but also potentially foster a bond during their shared struggle against the enemy. This was truly a win-win solution. What? How dare they treat Captain Buggy as prey? Are they out of their minds? Upon hearing Ganyu's suggestion, Zoro and Luffy hadn't reacted yet, but three captured pirates from the Buggy Pirates exclaimed in shock. It was unimaginable that Captain Buggy, who they considered the undisputed king of the East Blue, would one day be treated as prey for others to compete over. Even more shocking to them was that Zoro and Luffy actually began to ponder it. After a while, a good suggestion, I accept. Zoro nodded first, raising the long sword in his hand. A pirate with a bounty of 15 million, he looked forward to fighting such a strong opponent. I have no problem either. Seeing Zoro agree, Luffy immediately responded, not to be outdone. But seeing his bewildered expression, he clearly hadn't truly understood Ganyu's suggestion. Ganyu knew how slow her captain was, and patiently repeated it to him again. Oh. If I defeat that guy named Buggy, Zoro will acknowledge me. I get it. Luffy had an excited expression, as if he couldn't wait to fly to the island now to find Buggy. Zoro snorted, it's about defeating him before me, don't get it wrong. Of course I know that. I'll definitely be faster than you, Zoro. Luffy looked incredibly confident. He was a gum fruit rubber fruit user, and his movement speed after landing on the island was much faster than Zoro's. Moreover, he heard from Ganyu that Zoro was a hopeless direction sense challenged person, so he would definitely find Buggy first. Half a day passed in the blink of an eye. At dusk, as the reddish glow filled the sky, a small sailboat arrived at the island where the Buggy pirates were entrenched. This was a small port town, not large in scale, located right by the sea, with a port specifically for foreign ships to dock. However, at this moment, apart from a large ship flying a pirate flag, there were no other vessels. The area around the port was deserted, giving off a desolate feeling. That's because we're plundering this town. The local residents don't dare to stay in town. 3 captured pirates from the Buggy pirates explained proudly. They had no intention of concealing what their pirate crew had done to this town. In this world, it was already a case of the strong preying on the weak, and the powerful bullying the weak was not uncommon. Furthermore, compared to other pirate crews, their Buggy pirates were already considered benevolent. So far, apart from shelling the town, they hadn't actively killed anyone. But these ignorant residents still refused to surrender and harbored thoughts of resistance. No matter what, first take me to that guy named Buggy. Zoro listened expressionlessly. His mind was now solely focused on defeating Buggy before Luffy. And as long as Buggy was defeated, this town would naturally be freed from danger. Given Zoro's personality, it would be one thing if he didn't know, but now that he had witnessed a town being bullied by pirates, he naturally wouldn't stand idly by. This way. We'll take you to see Captain Buggy right now. The 3 pirates quickly led the way upon hearing this. The treasures they had plundered on the sea were tricked away by a woman, and they were worried about how to explain it to Buggy. If they brought these 3 audacious guys and shifted the blame onto them, Buggy would surely not pursue the matter further with them. On the other side, Luffy's face had also darkened at some point, and he seriously surveyed the surrounding environment of the island. Deserted. The ground was uneven, and buildings everywhere showed signs of having been bombed by cannon fire. Ganyu, I don't want that guy named Buggy on my ship anymore. After a while, he said in a low, indignant voice. Then, how about considering someone else? Ganyu brightened at this and took the opportunity to recommend a certain female swindler to him. Luffy pouted and looked at the 3 pirates leading Zoro. You're not talking about these 3 guys, are you? Of course not, I was going to say. Just as she was about to recommend Nami to Luffy, Ganyu's voice suddenly trailed off. Her eyes gradually widened, and a hint of pleasant surprise appeared within them. Because the person she was about to describe abruptly rushed into their line of sight. A fiery, orange-haired, curvaceous girl burst into the view of the few people. Behind her, dust billowed, and footsteps surged like a tide, countless figures hot on her heels. At the same time, shouts followed. Quick! Catch her! Don't let her get away! Catch that thief who stole Captain Buggy's Grand Line navigation chart. The 3 pirates leading the way recognized the orange-haired girl at a glance, and immediately cried out in surprise and anger. It's that woman who cheated us out of our treasure and ship. She even dared to steal Captain Buggy's nautical chart. With their shouts, Zoro and Luffy, who had been unclear about the situation, also reacted. This orange-haired girl was the female swindler the 3 pirates spoke of. Interesting. Zoro's lips curved slightly as he watched the large group of people relentlessly pursuing the girl. He had no good feelings for the pirate crew that had plundered the town, but this girl who dared to steal Buggy's nautical chart made him feel a bit of admiration. He thought to himself that if she asked for his help, he wouldn't mind lending a hand. Who would have thought? Nami saw Zoro at a glance, her eyes immediately lit up, and as she accelerated her run, she excitedly shouted. Boss, you've finally come to meet me. Boss. Zoro was stunned by the words, and before he could react to who the boss was referring to, he saw the girl dart past him like the wind, casually stuffing something into his arms. Boss, I'm leaving these small fries to you. Don't think you can run, you female swindler. The three pirates who had been deceived by Nami saw her rushing towards them and furiously pounced. However, Nami's movements were exceptionally agile, she easily dodged their pounces, her steps not faltering as she continued to speed towards the back. Soon, she saw Ganyu and Luffy behind Zoro and the others. When she saw the innocent and bewildered Straw Hat Boy, and the blue-haired girl with her mouth slightly open, looking somewhat surprised, Nami couldn't help but pause, a hint of distress flashing in her eyes. Had these two young people not figured out the situation yet? Couldn't they see that the green-haired man, whom she had diverted trouble, too, was about to fight the pirates? That's right. Nami had mistaken Zoro, who was with the three pirates, and Ganyu and Luffy, who were standing behind, as two separate groups. Zoro, with his fierce expression and three pirate minions, was taken for another pirate crew. Ganyu and Luffy, who looked harmless, became innocent civilians in her eyes. She had no psychological burden about shifting her trouble onto another pirate crew, but if it involved two innocent civilians. Nami shook her head sharply, then her eyes flashed with determination. Follow me. As she brushed past Ganyu and Luffy, she suddenly reached out and grabbed both their wrists, pulling them along as she sprinted wildly backward. Luffy and Ganyu, for some unknown reason, offered no resistance and allowed her to drag them along. A short while later, tap, tap, tap. As a series of hurried footsteps faded into the distance, the dust settled, and the three had vanished without a trace. Zoro frowned, looking slightly puzzled in the direction the three had left. These two guys just ran off with that woman. Didn't we agree to go defeat Buggy together? Wait, something seems off. Zoro stiffly turned his head, only to find that at some point, he was surrounded by people. 1, 2, 10, 30. In the blink of an eye, 50 or 60 pirates occupied every passable corner of the street, besieging him tightly. And without exception, the target these pirates were fixated on was something in his hand. Could it be? Zoro gasped, lowering his head to discover that he was holding a nautical chart. Nani. That woman actually gave him this, stolen goods. A cold sweat dripped from Zoro's forehead, he now clearly understood that he had been framed. And the woman who framed him had also abducted his two companions. Which meant he now had to face an entire pirate crew by himself. Boom. As the thunderous sound of cannon fire erupted behind him, a fierce battle began. That's not right, why are we running away? Luffy finally reacted, abruptly stopping and pulling back Nami, who was still trying to escape. His strength far surpassed Nami's. If he didn't want to run, Nami absolutely couldn't hold him. Haven't you figured it out yet? Those people chasing me are all pirates. Nami was surprised by his strength, but still said grumpily. If those guys catch up to us, we'll be dead. But I don't know those guys, why would they cause me trouble? Luffy asked, a question mark on his face. He was a pirate himself, what was there to be afraid of? Nami patted Luffy's shoulder upon hearing this, speaking with the tone of someone experienced. Pirates are unreasonable creatures like that, they're greedy, vicious, and violent. They won't care if you've offended them or not, they'll just kill you with a casual swipe as they pass by. Have you been hurt by pirates before? Luffy's eyes darted, and he surprisingly hit the nail on the head. Ganyu glanced at him in surprise, feeling that this guy was sometimes terrifyingly perceptive. Nami's body stiffened, as if recalling some nightmare, her eyes filled with both fear and hatred. After a while, I had a family member who died by their hands, she said flatly. At these words, the scene instantly fell silent. Anyone could hear the sadness and resentment hidden beneath her calm tone. Ganyu and Luffy both stared at her, at a loss for what to say. In short, you'd best stay away from pirates in the future, or you'll end up like me. Nami pointed to Zoro, who was already fighting the buggy pirates behind them, signaling Luffy and Ganyu to continue running with her while they had the chance. She had expected her tragic experience to instill fear of pirates in these two young people. Unexpectedly, their reactions were completely beyond her expectations. Not only did they show no fear, but they even looked at her with strange expressions. Is there a possibility that we are also pirates? Luffy and Ganyu exchanged glances, then spread their hands. Nani. No sooner had the words fallen than Nami's expression suddenly changed, her gaze sweeping back and forth between Ganyu, Luffy, and the battling Zoro. A moment later, her eyes filled with hostility. So you're all together. You're pirates too. That's right. And we're pirates with bounties over 20 million berries. Ganyu said with a light smile, pursing her lips. Emphasizing their bounty amount was to lay the groundwork for helping Nami fight Arlong in the future. Nami's Kokoyasi village had been occupied by a fish-man pirates for 10 years, and the pirate leader's name was Arlong. He was a pirate with a 20 million berries bounty, and his actual strength exceeded his bounty, making him an absolute monster in the East Blue. Nami had an agreement with him. If she gathered 100 million berries, she could buy Kokoyasi village from him, thus restoring the residents to a free and peaceful life. Nami firmly believed in this and had been working towards this goal for 10 years. But Ganyu knew that even if she gathered a billion or 10 billion berries, it would be useless. In the original story, the 100 million berries Nami collected was confiscated by Marines sent by Captain Nezumi, who was colluding with Arlong. Arlong truly valued Nami's talent for drawing nautical charts. He would never let her leave until he got the charts he wanted. 20 million. The moment Nami heard the bounty amount, her eyes widened involuntarily. These two people, who didn't look like pirates at all, actually had a bounty as high as 20 million. Her first reaction was that Ganyu was deceiving her, but the battle scene of Roronoa Zoro behind her made her believe it a little. She didn't know until she looked. He was fighting dozens of pirates alone, and he was still alive after so long, with more than a dozen pirates lying on the ground. This guy is Roronoa Zoro, the pirate hunter, who recently had a bounty of 10 million. What? It's him who wants to steal Captain Buggy's navigation chart. Is he planning to go to war with our buggy pirates? After a few exchanges, the buggy pirates also recognized Roronoa Zoro's identity. He's that pirate hunter, then this person must be. Nami's pupils constricted, and she suddenly looked at Ganyu, who was smiling cutely in front of her. A memory suddenly flooded her mind. A few days ago, she had seen two new pirates on the newspaper who had risen to fame in the East Blue. The Pirate Hunter and Frost Arrow, both with initial bounties as high as 10 million berries. At that time, she had quickly scanned the photos on the wanted posters, vaguely remembering one had green hair and the other had blue hair. Now, the green-haired one was that swordsman, so the blue-haired one, wasn't it precisely this young girl in front of her? That's right, the idiot you conned is Roronoa Zoro, the pirate hunter. I'm called Ganyu, the Frost Arrow, and this is our captain, Monkey D. Luffy. Ganyu smiled sweetly, introducing herself and her two companions quite formally. Indeed. It wasn't until Ganyu's words fell that Nami's last shred of hope was finally shattered. However, her reaction was extremely quick, and in a short while, she forced out an awkward smile. I never expected to meet such important figures as yourselves. I was meddling just now. I suppose you don't even care about these pirates. As she spoke, her feet quietly moved backward. By now, Nami also realized how foolish a thing she had done. She had intended to divert trouble, but accidentally led away someone else's companion. Now that these two had reacted, it would be troublesome if she didn't leave soon. Wait. Just as Nami was about to slip away, a small, even petite hand firmly gripped her wrist. The strength in the small hand was as firm as an iron clamp, making it impossible for her to break free. Running away without even leaving your name is quite impolite, you know. Ganyu held Nami's wrist firmly, secretly sighing at how tender and soft it was, while staring at her with a half-smile. This little thieving cat naturally couldn't escape right in front of her. Nami tried to struggle several times to no avail, so she had to put on a pitiful look and whispered. I'm just an insignificant nobody. You don't need to know my name. It's very necessary, because our captain is very interested in you, Ganyu said seriously. Me. Luffy pointed at himself, looking bewildered. So far, he was actually completely uninterested in this orange-haired girl. But since Ganyu said so, there must be a reason. Again, Ganyu was his only crew member at this stage, holding a position in his heart comparable to grilled meat. That's right, I'm very interested in you, so quickly tell us your name. Luffy pointed at Nami. My name is Nami. I'm just an ordinary navigator who got into trouble with the buggy pirates on this island and accidentally implicated you. Seeing that she couldn't escape, Nami had no choice but to reveal part of her identity. A navigator. Luffy's eyes lit up at the words. Their ship seemed to be missing a navigator. However, Luffy turned to look at Ganyu. He remembered Ganyu had been learning navigation all along, and although Roronoa Zoro always said she would never learn it in her life, he believed Ganyu would definitely become an amazing navigator in the future. Idiot, there can be more than one navigator. Understanding his gaze, Ganyu playfully tapped the back of his head. She had a deep understanding of her own navigation skills, while not as exaggerated as Roronoa Zoro claimed, she was indeed far inferior to Nami. If it weren't for Nami, she wouldn't even be confident enough to sail the ship out of the East Blue. That makes sense. Luffy scratched his head, then carefully scrutinized Nami's entire body. He didn't find any characteristics that attracted him in a short time. Finally, his gaze slightly froze, fixating on Nami's hair. Orange hair. Luffy's brain began to work rapidly. Ganyu's hair is blue, Roronoa Zoro's hair is green, her hair is orange. So, everyone's hair corresponds to a color. Oh. This completely confirmed it, she was the companion he was looking for. Nami, join us. Luffy suddenly said excitedly, his loud voice startling even Ganyu. Huh. Nami was even more bewildered. She had been waiting to be reprimanded, but never expected to receive an offer. After realizing, she subconsciously wanted to refuse, but then felt the small hand holding hers subtly tighten its grip. Hiss. So painful. Is this blue-haired little sister a monster? How can she be so strong? Nami secretly glanced at Ganyu, both surprised and scared. The other party was half a head shorter than her, with a delicate, doll-like cute little face, and a pair of black and red decorative small horns on her head. Nami assumed these were decorations. She looked like a noble young lady with no strength to bind a chicken. But that was only how she looked. Neither her strength nor her demeanor seemed like that of a kind soul. I agree, I'll temporarily act as your navigator. To avoid having her wrist crushed by this blue-haired little sister, Nami followed her inner choice and agreed to Luffy. Great. Luffy, of course, didn't know about the friendly exchange between the two female crew members behind the scenes. He only knew that he now had another crew member, one step closer to forming a pirate crew. At this moment, an urgent and resentful voice came. You fools, how long do you want me to fight alone? Everyone froze at the words, turning their heads in unison, and indeed saw a green-haired swordsman carrying 3 swords, covered in sweat, and panting. At this moment, he was fighting a pirate riding a unicycle. This person's strength was very unusual, actually suppressing him in a short time. But Roronoa Zoro had no pressure fighting one-on-one. What annoyed him were the surrounding pirate small fries who kept harassing him. If he weren't fighting alone, his current situation would never have turned out this way. Oops, we forgot about him. Ganyu and Luffy exchanged glances, both seeing the barely suppressed laughter in each other's eyes. A few seconds later. Ganyu, I'm going to find Buggy. Luffy stretched his wrists, crouching slightly, making a ready-to-go posture. I look forward to you defeating him before Roronoa Zoro. Ganyu leaned closer, reaching out to straighten his straw hat, which had tilted slightly from his recent run. Remember, Buggy has a very big red nose. Ganyu reminded him in his ear. She knew Luffy had some face blindness, and even if Buggy stood in front of him, he might not recognize him. But as long as there was a distinct feature, Luffy would never forget it. I understand. Luffy nodded in response, full of vigor. After Ganyu straightened his straw hat, his legs, already compressed to the extreme, suddenly pushed off the ground, and the accumulated Gomu rubber elasticity burst forth instantly, launching him like a cannonball. With a whoosh, he had turned into a blur that was hard to discern with the naked eye, charging straight into the center of the battle. Nani, who is it? My bullets were bounced away by him. What kind of monster is this? The next moment, exclamations and screams came one after another from the crowd. Luffy was like a wild bull charging, tearing through the crowd with destructive force. With his strength, these ordinary pirates couldn't even withstand a single move. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 pirates lay on the ground, unable to get up. Roronoa's pressure was greatly reduced, and he glanced with a hint of surprise at Luffy, who was weaving freely through the crowd. This guy is actually that strong. At the same time, a sense of urgency also rose in his heart. Surely this guy won't defeat Buggy first and become his captain, right? Roronoa, you dare to be distracted while fighting me. Acrobatics. Fire breath. Without warning, a flame erupted from someone's mouth. What the hell is this? Roronoa quickly dodged, his eyes wide as he stared at the fire breather in front of him. This flame was emitted by his opponent, the pirate swordsman on a unicycle. He thought fighting on a unicycle was already absurd enough, but he didn't expect this guy could also breathe fire. A circus. He couldn't help but retort. Haha, that's right. The man on the unicycle, with half his face covered by long hair, chuckled softly. I am the chief of staff of the Buggy Pirates, acrobatic swordsman, Kabaji. Who asked for your name? Roronoa didn't really want to talk to this guy who was full of bizarre quirks, and directly slashed at him with his sword. Clang! Kabaji blocked with his sword, actually stopping Roronoa's incredibly sharp blade. Although his fighting style was a bit strange, his strength was actually not weak. Not bad, let's see how many more slashes you can take. Roronoa became interested, and his fighting spirit suddenly soared. What? This guy hasn't been using his full strength all this time. Kabaji secretly thought it was bad, clearly sensing the change in Roronoa's aura. On the other side, Luffy also encountered an opponent blocking him. That was a huge lion, controlled by Mochi, the beast tamer of the Buggy Pirates. Luffy initially suffered a lot of hardship from sneak attacks by this lion. But after several exchanges, Luffy displayed his combat instincts, far surpassing ordinary people, and gradually turned the tide of the battle. Mochi, the beast tamer, on the lion's back, watched, sweating profusely. Boy, are you a devil fruit user? Yes, I'm a Gomu rubber man who ate the gum fruit rubber fruit. Luffy answered with a straightforward expression. He never concealed his devil fruit ability. It's actually true. It's over. This is really bad. Mochi instantly broke out in a cold sweat. He had planned to easily deal with this unknown Straw Hat Boy and then go support his comrades against the pirate hunter. But he didn't expect this boy to be a devil fruit user, just like their Captain Buggy. One must know that devil fruit users are all monsters. In the East Blue, ordinary people are simply not qualified to fight against them. Nami's eyes widened slightly, her pupils reflecting the figures of Luffy and Roronoa fighting. She knew Mochi and Kabaji, as two major cadres of the Buggy Pirates, their strength was considerable, even considered strong in the East Blue. But now, in front of Roronoa and Luffy, these two were being beaten without any ability to retaliate. Is he a devil fruit user? Suddenly, Nami seemed to discover something, her beautiful eyes lit up, and she pointed at Luffy, asking. Ganyu was also originally paying attention to her two companions' battle, and upon hearing her question, immediately replied. Luffy ate the knee. Let's just say it's the gum fruit rubber fruit. His body can stretch and contract at will, and ordinary bullets and blunt weapons are ineffective against him. Such a terrifying ability. Nami clicked her tongue softly, lamenting that devil fruit users were indeed as monstrous and terrifying as rumored. But, that guy Buggy is also a devil fruit user. Will they be a match for Buggy? As soon as she thought of this, Nami became agitated again. She didn't want to die here with three pirates she didn't know, but she couldn't break free from the blue-haired girl's hand. What should she do? Just as Nami was troubled, she suddenly felt her wrist loosen. She let go. A hint of surprise flashed in Nami's eyes, and just as she was about to say something and look for an opportunity to slip away, a bone-chilling coldness suddenly swept over her. This is. She looked up in astonishment, her gaze fixed on the powerful blue-haired girl in front of her. She saw a visible stream of frost swirling around the girl, and she extended her hand, actually drawing an ice crystal longbow out of thin air from the fierce cold. Ah! Another devil fruit user. Nami was too shocked to speak. When did the East Blue have so many devil fruit users? No, now is not the time to be shocked. Nami swallowed, and said timidly, what kind of ability is this? What are you going to do? Ganyu half closed her eyes, her two slender fingers gently pulling the bowstring, an arrow condensed from frost faintly appearing on the string. Of course, to clear obstacles for them, so no one disturbs their battle. With that said, her two fingers suddenly loosened, and the ready ice arrow flew off the string. As soon as the arrow left the string, those two fingers quickly pulled the bowstring back again, repeating the same action several times. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Under Nami's astonished gaze, 5 ice crystal arrows shot out in 5 different directions at terrifying speed. Sizzle. In an instant, all the clamor in the area ceased abruptly, turning into a deadly silence. An icy chill permeated the streets, where dozens of motionless ice sculptures stood. Those dozens of pirate thugs were all frozen into ice sculptures in a flash. Is this, still human? On the suddenly quiet street, Nami's terrified, trembling voice echoed. Who told you I was human? Hearing her navigator's trembling voice, Ganyu's lips curved slightly, revealing a knowing smile. What do you mean? Could it be that you? Nami's gaze involuntarily fell on the exquisite small horns on Ganyu's head. At this moment, she suddenly realized, those might not be mere decorations. Ganyu didn't answer again, only leaving her with a back shrouded in cold air, both mysterious and reassuringly powerful. This display of strength was still to convey a message to Nami. They possessed the power to save Kokoyashi village. And after Nami witnessed her, Luffy, and Roronoa's strength, she would most likely no longer be solely focused on escaping, and perhaps, a thought of asking for their help would quietly sprout in her heart. By then, she could naturally and truly dedicate herself to the Straw Hat Pirates. At the same time, the two cadres of the buggy pirates were almost scared out of their wits by the scene before them. Their companions, who had been full of life just a moment ago, had turned into ice sculptures before their eyes in an instant. What happened? Could it be that Marine Admiral Aokiji had personally arrived? It's the Frost Arrow, that woman who follows the pirate hunter. It must be her who made a move. Ultimately, it was Kabaji, the chief of staff of the buggy pirates, who reacted first. He scanned his surroundings, his gaze locking onto a figure shrouded in cold mist. The distance was too great, and the frost was too thick, he could only vaguely make out a silhouette with strong feminine charm. The person held a bow with both hands, aiming it remotely in their direction. Judging solely by her figure, she was definitely a rare beauty, but unfortunately, she was a bit short, which didn't quite match his criteria for a partner. No. This was not the time to be thinking about such things. Kabaji slapped his own face hard, his expression grave as he stared intently at that figure. Roronoa. Do you intend to use numbers to bully the few? When dozens of people were ganging up on me just now, you weren't saying that. Zoro snorted disdainfully, his peripheral vision sweeping over the pirates turned into ice sculptures, a hint of shock flashing in his eyes. This woman's strength, every time she made a move, it redefined his understanding. Since that was the case, he couldn't let her look down on him. Don't worry, she won't interfere with our fight. Zoro's eyes lowered slightly, a smile that could scare children into crying curving his lips. As he spoke, he tightened his grip on the long sword in his mouth by a few points, crossing the two swords he held in his hands in front of his chest, their cold, gleaming blades pointing directly at Kabaji's body. Kabaji trembled all over, a killing intent more bone-chilling than the surrounding cold air assailing him. This is three-sword style, Onigiri. Whoosh. The blade streaked across the sky like lightning, flashing and disappearing in an instant. By the time Kabaji regained his senses, 3 lines of blood had already burst forth from his chest. So fast. He stared blankly downwards, only managing to utter 2 words before collapsing weakly to the ground. He hadn't actually unleashed his full strength, many strange and varied techniques yet to be used. However, Zoro, stimulated by a certain woman, directly used what was arguably his strongest killing move at this stage. Zoro sheathed his swords, glanced at Luffy who was still wrestling with the lion, a smirk playing on his lips, and silently turned and sped away. He was going to find the clown Buggy, who had not yet appeared. Oh no. I can't let Zoro get there first. Luffy also grew anxious at the sight. Whoever defeated Buggy first would be the captain, this was the agreement he had made with Zoro. Ganyu was the witness to this competition. He absolutely had to win Zoro's approval, and even more so, he couldn't let Ganyu down. Big guy, I'm getting serious. Luffy clapped his fists together fiercely, his eyes becoming more focused than ever before. Woof. The lion, Richie, tilted its head, showing human-like confusion. Looking at this human swinging his arms, it inexplicably began to tremble. Richie, what's wrong with you? Mochi, the beast tamer, sitting on its back, noticed the abnormality and was about to check what was wrong with his pet. But at this moment, he heard a whistling sound tearing through the air suddenly approaching. Gomu Gomu. Pistol. A suddenly extended arm shot out like a nimble snake, striking heavily against the lion's cheek. Only a tragic howl was heard. The lion Richie's face was distorted from the blow, and its massive body gradually lifted off the ground. Nani. Watching the ground getting further and further away, Mochi's expression gradually turned to horror. But at this point, his fear was useless. A few seconds later, along with his pet lion, he became a shooting star in the sky, disappearing into the horizon. Zoro. Wait for me. Luffy retracted his fist, not paying attention to the shooting star in the sky, and turned to rush in the direction Zoro had left. Seeing that both of them had already left, Ganyu looked at Nami. Let's go, we'll follow too. Huh. Go where? Nami was still immersed in shock and didn't react for a moment. Ganyu's eyes curved into crescent moons, and she rubbed her hands together excitedly, of course, to raid the buggy pirate's treasury. Hearing this, Nami's eyes instantly lit up. This was troublesome, it truly was an invitation she couldn't refuse. Inside a spacious tent. A red-nosed man dressed like a circus clown sat idly on a chair, twirling a small knife between his fingers. He was the captain of the buggy pirates, Clown Buggy. Just 10 minutes ago, a thief hidden on his ship had stolen his treasured navigation chart, which he had kept for many years. Since coming to the East Blue, Buggy had never suffered such a loss. In a fit of rage, he dispatched almost all of his elite subordinates, vowing to catch the audacious thief. But strangely, as time ticked by, not only was the thief nowhere to be found, but none of his dispatched subordinates had returned either. Where did those fools go to slack off? Buggy's face was grim, and the hand that had been idly playing with the knife slammed heavily onto the table. Hiss. Feeling the pain from his palm, Buggy's expression involuntarily changed, almost unable to resist crying out in front of his subordinates. After a good while, he waved for the few remaining subordinates beside him. Go. Bring Kabaji and Mochi back to me. Yes. A few subordinates rushed out of the tent in a hurry after receiving orders. However, as soon as they exited, they flew back in even faster, each with a knife wound on their body, falling disheveled onto the carpet inside the tent. Buggy's eyes narrowed slightly, and he reached for a small knife on the table. Which blind idiot dares to trespass on my territory? Thump, thump, thump. Steady footsteps approached from afar. A long sword pushed aside the tent flap, and soon, a green-haired man with a sword entered Buggy's vision. When the green-haired man saw him, he actually revealed a sinister smile, like one seeing prey. I've come to defeat you, Clown Buggy. Buggy flew into a rage upon hearing this. What, you're saying my nose is red? Huh. When did I say such a thing? Zoro was bewildered, and was actually drawn to look at his nose. But your nose is indeed red, and quite large. As these words were spoken, the air inside the tent suddenly solidified. It's over, it's all over. He actually dared to talk about Lord Buggy's nose. A few of Buggy's subordinates cast sympathetic glances, as if they had already foreseen Zoro's fate. It was well known that Buggy's biggest taboo was for others to discuss his nose. You actually dared to say my nose is big and red. Buggy trembled with rage, incoherently trying to curse Zoro. But at this moment, with a swish, Zoro drew his sword from its sheath as if no one else was there. Less talk, get ready to lie on the ground. He had already heard the approaching footsteps outside the tent. Clearly, Luffy was catching up. He had to deal with this red-nosed guy before Luffy came in. To be honest, he wasn't really that obsessed with competing for the captain's position. The reason he insisted on competing with Luffy, in the final analysis, was because he had a fire burning inside him. And this fire was inextricably linked to a certain woman. Whoosh! Before Zoro could fully draw his blade, Buggy preemptively threw a small knife. This attack was mainly to test Zoro's strength. As a pirate who had been sailing the seas for many years, Buggy never underestimated any enemy. If Zoro could easily avoid this knife, Buggy would definitely turn and run without hesitation. Because such a person was very likely a strong individual who had mastered observation haki. Unlike those pirates in the East Blue who had never set foot on the Grand Line, Buggy himself had returned from the New World, and more than 20 years ago, he was even a crew member on the pirate King Galdi Roger's ship. He knew better than anyone in the East Blue how terrifying a strong individual with haki could be. To Buggy's secret relief, although the opponent dodged the flying knife, his movements were a bit clumsy, and a cut appeared on his cheek. Confirmed, just a greenhorn with a bit of strength. Buggy grinned easily and said, "Kid, I'll let you know what happens when you offend me." Zoro didn't respond, merely gazing intently at the man dressed as a clown. After witnessing that last attack, he had already confirmed that this was a powerful opponent. Facing such an opponent, he shouldn't rush, but the approaching footsteps in the distance made Zoro's heart increasingly impatient. Finally, he suddenly exerted force, and the sharp blade, like a venomous snake emerging from its hole, thrust directly at Buggy. His speed was extremely fast, like a beast pouncing on its prey. The blade was its fangs, biting fiercely at the target. A look of surprise flashed in Buggy's eyes, feeling that this greenhorn's strength exceeded his expectations. But when his gaze fell on the weapon in Zoro's hand, a hint of mockery inevitably appeared in his eyes. Swordsmen were the opponents he feared least. In fact, he could be called the nightmare of all swordsmen. The devil fruit he ate was called the chop chop fruit, and its ability allowed him to split his body at will. In other words, a swordsman's slashes were completely ineffective against him. However, Buggy had no intention of revealing his ability so quickly. He suddenly lifted his foot and kicked the table in front of him, flying. Crack! The sharp blade instantly split the table in half, but Zoro's figure remained frozen in place. Gone. The person he was going to stab was gone. "I'm right here." A voice came from above his head, and at the same time, there were sounds of air being torn from top to bottom. Ah! The small knives cut through the surface of his body, his clothes and skin immediately tore, and blood flowed out, creating 5 or 6 cuts. To this, Zoro merely grunted, his brow furrowing slightly. Immediately, he expressionlessly swung his sword upwards. A faint sword chi enveloped the blade, drawing a crescent shape in the air. Whoosh! The canopy above him tore in response, revealing the increasingly dim sky. However, Buggy, who was originally above the canopy, once again changed his position, landing on the ground 10 meters away from Zoro. He played with a blood-stained small knife in his hand, leisurely observing Zoro. You must be that pirate hunter, from the rumors, right?" After several brief exchanges, Buggy had already confirmed Zoro's identity. Actually, before the other party became a pirate, he hadn't paid much attention. But the major incident in Shell's town more than 10 days ago had been widely rumored in this part of the East Blue. A man and a woman had actually defeated the highest-ranking officer at the local marine base. This was not something an ordinary pirate would dare to do. "Are you interested in becoming my subordinate? If you agree, I can let bygones be bygones for your previous offense." Buggy had the intention of recruiting Zoro. Although he had never shown it, he also had an ambition in his heart, and powerful and potential subordinates could bring him great help. "I have no interest in being anyone's subordinate, no matter who it is." Zoro coldly refused, reaching out to draw his third blade, Wado Ikimonji, and biting it between his teeth. He had only used 2 swords in his previous exchanges with Buggy. Now using the third, this was his strongest form. "What a pity, then I'll just have to send you to your death." Buggy suddenly showed a cunning smile, and he suddenly waved his hand in one direction. Are you ready, my little ones? Ready. Zoro suddenly turned around. He felt a fatal sense of threat. It was a pitch-black cannon, which Buggy's subordinates had pushed out at some point, its muzzle aimed directly at him. Go on, have a taste of my Buggy ball. Buggy waved his big hand and shouted. Little ones, fire. The moment his voice fell, a cannon roar like muffled thunder was heard. Zoro's pupils constricted, watching a black projectile, much larger than an ordinary cannonball, whistle towards him. Too close, no time to dodge at all. In desperation, Zoro gritted his teeth and swung his sword, directly cleaving the projectile. An ordinary cannonball might really have been split in half by his sword. But Buggy's special cannonball was completely different. The moment Zoro's blade touched it, it exploded with a bang. Bang! The deafening explosion echoed across the sky. Amidst the bursting sparks, Zoro, like a kite with a broken string, flew backward rapidly, crashing onto the ground more than 10 meters away. His entire body was scorched black, as if he had been charred by the cannonball. Idiot, trying to cut my Buggy ball with a sword, you're practically asking to die. Looking at Zoro in such a miserable state, Buggy loudly mocked him and his subordinates. Just as he was about to tell some of his subordinates to check his corpse, Buggy suddenly widened his eyes. Wah! What? He lowered his head in astonishment, and actually saw a blade sticking out of his chest. Behind him, there was an extremely heavy gasp. I never said it was over. Without even turning around, Buggy knew that the one who had stabbed him through the chest from behind was the corpse he had thought had lost all signs of life. Under the horrified gazes of several of Buggy's subordinates, the thoroughly blackened Zoro got up from the ground and stabbed Buggy through the chest. With such a fatal blow, he was convinced that the opponent had no chance of survival. Therefore, Zoro sharply withdrew his sword, pushed Buggy to the ground, then sheathed his sword, turned around, and faced a certain Straw Hat Boy who had just arrived. Luffy, you're one step too late. A curve appeared at the corner of Zoro's mouth. Even with his scorched appearance, it was clear he was in a good mood now. Despite the difficulty, he had defeated Buggy before Luffy arrived. Which meant he was the winner of this fight. Watch out, Zoro. However, to Zoro's great surprise, he didn't see any frustration on Luffy's face. Instead, he was shouting at him with a panicked expression. It was precisely because of Luffy's shout that his body, which had completely relaxed, regained a hint of vigilance. Hiss. Zoro's expression suddenly changed, and a sharp pain came from his lower abdomen. Thanks for watching.